From Here to the Stars. I am your host, Stephen Euin Cobb. Our guest today is Doug Loss, an IT professional and president of the board of directors for the Tennessee Valley Interstellar Workshop.
This interview was recorded live at the Interstellar Research Group symposium.
Thank you for taking the time. Let's see, my first question is, do you believe that interstellar travel is impossible or inevitable or somewhere in between?
Well, it's certainly not impossible by the laws of physics.
Mm-hmm.
However, inevitable is not a physical question. This is a societal question,
Mm-hmm.
a financial question, a question of willpower and of will.
Mm-hmm.
So is it inevitable? Unfortunately, it's not.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what was the third part of the question?
The first one was impossible,
Okay.
but that's unlikely.
Definitely not impossible, definitely not inevitable.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess somewhere in between. Yes,
Okay.
it can be done if we have the will to do it.
Okay. What do you feel is the biggest hurdle that has to be overcome? I mean, there are a number of them. There's the money, there's the energy, there's the time, distance, the political problems.
First of all, right now we're just at the very beginning of having the capability to send things outside of the solar system.
Mm-hmm.
We're developing the propulsion technologies. We are beginning to understand what kinds of missions we can do, what might be interesting to do and worth doing.
Mm-hmm.
We have not, so far as I know, come up with any reasonable way to finance these missions other than through government.
Mm-hmm.
That's something that I've been talking about with some other folks. One of the things that you'll notice for any kind of research, any kind of scientific research or corporate research, there's usually some sort of return on investment, whether it's a financial return, an informational return, but you get something back for the money you invest within the lifetime of one of the primary researchers. That's not something that's likely to happen with interstellar research.
Mm-hmm.
So the question becomes, how do you finance something that the people putting the money in are not going to see a return on in their lifetime?
Mm-hmm.
The question hasn't been answered, but it's something that we need to think about.
Okay.
And I mention this because people are thinking about pretty much everything else for interstellar research. That people are just beginning to realize is a question.
Mm-hmm. There are fast missions.
Mm-hmm.
Professor, I believe is what's his name?
Phil Lubin.
Phil Lubin, that's it, Dr. Phil Lubin. I interviewed him a couple of years ago, and he's talking about sending 1 gram space probes,
Right.
basically a chip.
Chipsats.
Yes. And I described this in other interviews. He says he wants to use an external array of lasers directed at this to propel it forward up to maybe a quarter of the speed of light, so that you could accelerate it in 10 minutes, and then another one, and then another one, and another, send out a whole cloud of them in all different directions. That would be a fast mission, so to speak. Still, it would take like 4.3 light years to the nearest star, a
About
quarter.
20 years.
Yeah, about 20 years. And that's just to arrive, not even send the data back. You need another 5 years, basically, to send the data back. So that's, I guess, 25 years. And that's a fast mission.
Mm-hmm.
So that at least within your own lifetime, you could have the return of the data.
Mm-hmm.
But there are also slow missions, maybe human, but also robotic probes. So yeah, you're right. Very often you could have the problem, you don't get the payoff.
Mm-hmm.
You don't receive the benefit from the pay-in. But for a fast mission, you could. You mentioned that there's what do they call it?
Breakthrough Starshot?
That one, yeah. Is there funding for it? Is there proposals? I mean, I know he'd written a white paper on it.
Yuri Milner, who was a Russian billionaire, has committed $100 million of his own money to fund Breakthrough Starshot. Now that's not enough to build the multi-gigawatt laser arrays that would be required, but it's enough to get Breakthrough Starshot doing the research to determine what problems exist that need to be addressed before you can do this. Now, again, finance is everything. Where will the money come from? How will it be found? How will it be used? These are all questions. Some of the technical aspects of the breakthrough missions involve building multi-gigawatt or multi-laser gigawatt arrays in probably the Atacama Desert in Chile, which is very high. Gets above a major portion of the atmosphere, which keeps your beams from being attenuated so much. When you hit the sails for these small sats, assuming you've solved every other problem, once you've accelerated it to 2/10, 25% of the speed of light, you have no steering. It's going where it's going. So you have to be extremely precisely pointed before you hit it. Now, that probably means you're not sending one out and then one to someplace else. You're sending 100, 1,000 out, just in hopes that they don't disperse too widely and one or two of them actually get near the planet you're looking at, Proxima Centauri b, let's say. And I'm speculating on this. There may be ways found to do some mild steering, but at this point I don't know of any.
I would think that as they neared the star, I don't know how close, but that they could sort of make. I mean, they have a reflective side, obviously for the lasers. They could like produce a glancing solar sail effect that would steer them, but a very tiny amount.
The problem that you find is at that point there's no laser at the star firing back. So you're using whatever stellar radiation you have. It's not going to be very high intensity. So you could have some effect, but you're still moving at 2/10 the speed of light. It's probably not going to be a whole lot of effect.
Okay, because it would have to be far away because it's kind of moving so fast.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The closer you get, the greater amount of deflection you're going to need to make a usable change.
Okay.
But let's just assume that something does get there, does get data and sense it. You now have a satellite about this big with an extremely low energy to send a signal back. What that means is it's still going to be able to send some information back, but your data rate is going to be very low. So you're not talking about downloading something from YouTube. You're talking about taking hours, days to get one image back.
And in hours or days, it could be its solar cell from that star would be getting
It's
some
still
energy,
moving at 2/10 the speed of light. It's
and
not
then it's
slowing
going to
down.
lose the star.
Yep.
Yeah.
So it's going to have some recording capability, some storage capability on the chip. Now all of this has already been talked about and they're thinking about it, but these are some of the problems that they've got to address before they're even ready to consider sending something out. Now the other question you were asking is about multi-year mission, I should say, multi-decade, multi-century missions, slow missions.
Yeah.
If we're talking about manned missions, those are the only missions that we're even considering at the moment, because to accelerate something to 2/10 the speed of light, we can't do it at anything larger than that. I'd have to look at the numbers, but they're talking about illuminating a sail with that gram-sized chip for a half an hour to get it up to that speed. If you're talking about a ship large enough to hold people and a biosphere, an ecology that can maintain them for hundreds or thousands of years, that's larger than anything we've ever launched into space. That's probably at least the size of an aircraft carrier. We're talking about thousands of tons. To do that with a beam-powered satellite, or beam-powered propulsion using lasers, you'd be illuminating it for years to get it up to that speed. Plus, you still wouldn't be able to decelerate it. So you're going to want to be able to have long-term missions at speeds reasonably slow enough that once you get into a system or near a system, whoever's there multi-generations in the future will be able to either decelerate or offload onto other craft to land on a planet.
One of the problems of having a laser array, even if it's on the surface of the Earth, is that it's a weapon, or at least other countries would presume it would be a weapon.
It's definitely a weapon.
Yeah. Especially if it's in orbit. I mean, it'd be, because it'd be traveling around the world. But even on the surface of the Earth, it would be a weapon against their satellites. So that it becomes a political problem. And so that's an additional worry and hurdle to be overcome.
As an example,
Okay.
in the 1970s, there was a gentleman from Germany named Lute Kaiser, designed an extremely low-cost launch system. I can give loads of details, but he was looking at launching payloads. We initially considered the space shuttle as a truck. It turned out not to be. It was much too expensive. His was a truck. I mean, he was using nothing aerospace rated. He was using cold-rolled steel pipe from the gas industry and things like this. He was going to launch stuff for very low cost. He was run out of Germany because the Russians created a disinformation campaign, the Soviets I should say, not the Russians,
Okay.
a disinformation campaign saying cruise missiles and things like that. He had a deal with Libya to do some test launches, and they managed to kill that. They killed a low-cost space industry just because of the possible political repercussions. We'd see the same thing with a giant laser array. That yes, it can illuminate sails and send them out. For a sail not to be instantly disintegrated, it has to be reflective to, I don't know, 6 nines, 99.9999%. Anything less than that is just gone. Hit any satellite in orbit, which is definitely less than that, it's gone.
Yeah.
So yeah, anytime you have an energy concentration like that, doesn't matter where it comes from, doesn't matter its initial intent, it's a weapon.
Okay. If we're going to colonize an Earth-like planet, that presumes that it, like the Earth, has bacterial growth in order to have oxygen in its atmosphere. And then it becomes like a bit of an ethical question of how much life are we willing to displace, destroy, on this other world in order to colonize it. If it's bacterial only, it might sit well with some people, maybe not. But if it's plants and animals, even if they're just primitive animals, it might not sit so well with some people. What's your take on that as a bit of potential hurdle?
That is an interesting philosophical and moral question that is being debated. At our symposium, we have philosophers as presenters who ask the exact question. How is it moral, when is it moral to colonize off-Earth environments? My suspicion, and again, complete speculation, if we are sending a generation ship out to a planet like this, and it's just got bacteria, nothing much else, no higher life forms, they're probably not going to want to get off that ship. They've lived there for centuries, thousands of years. They've got what they need. They're in a new system. They've got lots of resources in orbit, not on the planet's surface, that they can use. There's not a lot of incentive to go down.
I hadn't thought of that.
Now, everyone assumes that once you get there, everyone's going to be hot to live on the planet.
But living on a planet would be a newfangled idea for them.
It's an interesting concept. I've talked over with some philosopher friends because we had I won't say a large debate, but there was a big discussion about what's the morality of colonizing other off-world environments. And as soon as you start with the word colonization, they immediately think exploitation of indigenes.
Even if nobody's there.
Well, they immediately think that, and they immediately start on whatever their political argument du jour is.
Mm-hmm.
It seems to me that we have a semantic problem.
Ah.
Because we're talking about permanent off-world settlements.
Mm-hmm.
We're not talking necessarily about colonies, because there may not be anyone there.
Mm-hmm.
But what I'm saying is we're not talking about a colonization agency controlling this, like the Bureau of Indian Affairs, let's say.
Mm-hmm.
We're talking about a planned community, in essence, more like a homeowners association.
Mm-hmm.
So the generation ship that goes out there is probably going to be more like an earthly planned community than the conquistadors coming and looking for gold.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. Some people would say, why aren't telescopes enough to just look out into this into the universe and that's enough?
Yeah,
It's a fundamental question, really.
it's a question between people who like to watch life going by and people who want to live life. I don't know about you, but if I see that there's a possibility, I want to go out and I want to touch it. I want to see what's possible. I want to see what can be done using resources.
Mm-hmm.
It's, I come from a bit of an engineering background. We used to say, when people are showing, slightly off topic, but sort of, neat spacecraft designs, and it's wonderful. We called them viewgraph spaceships,
Mhm.
because all you had was pictures that somebody designed.
Hmm.
An old friend of mine who was a rocket chemistry scientist in the 50s said, unless you're bending tin, you're doing nothing. He said, I want to see a metal prototype, I want to see something that you can test. And that's the same thing. Telescopes are very nice to figure out where to go, but you're living life vicariously if you're just watching it through a telescope.
You're familiar with the Kepler telescope, of course.
Sure.
That's discovered over 3,000 exoplanets, or planets orbiting other stars.
Right.
But the James Webb telescope, which is not launched yet, of course,
Correct.
it will be able to do the spectrographic analysis of their atmospheres, of those that we've already found, as well as finding others. What is your excitement level, maybe I should say, concerning the James Webb telescope?
One, I really hope it manages to not have any more cost overruns and gets launched on time now, since it's already past launch date or two. I'm really looking forward to the information that it returns. What we've had so far for space observatories, even ground-based observatories, we can discover exoplanets down to just a bit larger than Earth, but we're having difficulty. It's just on the very edge of our sensing capability to discover planets Earth size around stars larger than the M-class red dwarf stars. There's a little bit of a difficulty with the M-class stars. First of all, they're the most common type of star in the universe, well, in the galaxy at least. But they put out little enough energy that for a planet to be in the habitable zone, which is generally defined as the area around the star where liquid water can exist on the surface. For a planet to be close enough to in the habitable zone of this star, it's got to be close enough that it's probably going to be tidally locked, as the moon is to the Earth, just displaying one face to the body it orbits constantly. This may have problems with the habitability of such planets. Seeing terrestrial-sized planets around stars larger than that, K-class or G-class stars, is not quite within our capability yet. James Webb should be able to find some of those as we get there. And as you say, using the spectrographs, we can examine the atmospheres of these planets, look for biological signs. A number of people had been saying, if we find free oxygen around a planet, that's a guaranteed sign of biology. There's been a fair amount of speculation saying it's a good suggestion for biology, but there are abiotic methods of having free oxygen in an atmosphere. Others are saying if you're seeing oxygen and methane at the same time, that's pretty much a guarantee. Just
I would
be-
think methane would burn. You know?
Well, that's the thing. Methane will react with oxygen
Oh,
and disappear.
it means
so
it's
if
being
you see it there,
generated.
it's being generated
Ah.
enough that it's a sign that there must be some biological method of generating.
Even if it's only cows passing gas.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Unlikely to be cows.
Probably not. Just a
But-
thought.
Yeah, but there's a lot of, I'm not sure I call it research, informed speculation on just what kind of signatures are unequivocal signs of biological activity.
Mm-hmm.
So,
My anticipation is that chemistry is going to go through a huge number of advances
Mhm.
because we're going to discover so many chemical reactions at so many different temperature ranges that, and there'll be a lot of surprises
Mhm.
that chemists didn't even think that it could do.
Mhm.
Which means that if we do discover oxygen and methane, it might not be biology. Might
and this
not.
is always a possibility.
Yeah, yeah. Let's see.
Oh, one thing I did want to mention, this is kind of curious to me.
Mhm.
All the exoplanets we've found, all the systems we've found, I won't say all, but the great number of them look very different from the solar system.
Yeah. That's,
And
Mhm.
the original assumption, before we knew much about exoplanets, if anything, was the assumption of mediocrity. We're just assuming Earth is nothing special.
Mhm.
We're coming to find that that may not be true, that Earth may not be in the middle of the bell curve. For one thing, we've got a giant moon. We don't see anything close to the ratio of size between Earth and Luna anywhere else in the solar system, and so far anywhere else in the universe.
Mhm.
We see a preponderant, well, a very large number of what we call hot Jupiters.
Mhm.
These are planets the size of Jupiter or larger, orbiting so near the star that their surface temperatures, atmospheric surface temperatures, are 1,000 degrees centigrade.
Mhm.
We're seeing a lot of system dynamics, planets moving back and forth, eccentric orbits, things like this. Now, clearly they're not moving back and forth like zip, zip, zip,
Mhm.
but we can tell from how the orbits have developed that they must have started farther out and moved in. People are beginning to wonder just exactly how representative the solar system is of other systems out there. This may inform our searches for terrestrially habitable planets also.
Mhm. Yeah, it's very bizarre.
Yeah,
out there.
exactly. I mean, who was it? Huxley said the universe is not only stranger than we imagined, it's stranger than we can imagine.
Yeah, yeah. Let's see. Of the obstacles that are to be overcome, what do you think is going to be the easiest? Maybe we've already overcome it.
The easiest to overcome, quite honestly, will probably be the technical.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
To develop the capability to understand how to build the engines to get us up to the speeds we need to do interstellar exploration with actual spacecraft.
Mhm.
I don't think that will be nearly as difficult as getting the political will, the financial will, the social, sociological, societal
Mhm.
will. Those are going to be the hard things to do.
Okay.
And pretty much, as always, the science is the easy part.
Mhm. Many people are familiar with the SETI program.
Mhm.
There are some people that feel that the SETI is doing it backwards, not listening for an incoming signal. That we should be sending an outgoing signal, which has been done.
Mhm.
Some people are in opposition to that, feeling that we should not be revealing our location to other civilizations, which kind of flies in the face of the Fermi paradox. But anyway, what's your thoughts on that, and also the Fermi paradox, perhaps?
Well, METI, as it's called, Messaging Extraterrestrial Intelligence, is fairly controversial. There are groups that say, first, you shouldn't be making this decision. This is something that Earth as a whole should be deciding, because you're not just saying, hey, I'm here. You're saying, hey, our planet is here.
Hmm.
Now, honestly, I don't think most of the messages that we've sent out will make a whole lot of difference. because with signal attenuation, with the inverse square law, the chances of anyone actually listening to it, being able to decipher it beyond 5-10 light years are pretty low. Now, other things, I think Jim Benford made the point that we may already have signaled our existence, not because we're broadcasting things, but because our traffic control radar, our early warning radar, very powerful emitters of radio signals from a planet's surface that couldn't possibly be natural. And it's one thing we use in the search for SETI. We're looking for techno-signatures, things coming from their waste heat that say, oh, there must be some sort of technological civilization there because that stuff can't be done naturally. So it may be a moot point.
Do you feel there's any danger of some civilization discovering us, stumbling upon our signals and stuff?
To be honest, not really.
Okay.
The reason I say that is because, as I think Enrico Fermi himself said, if they're out there and they're traveling across the universe at just fairly slow generational ship speeds, if they had started just a few thousand years ago, they could have spread enough so that they'd be very obvious and we're not seeing them. I would love for there to be alien civilizations. I'm not convinced there are. There's one other thing that I like to say. An intelligent society doesn't necessarily mean a civilization. Society and civilization aren't the same thing. A civilization doesn't necessarily mean technology, at least not technology as we know it.
Yeah, that's true.
So there are filters at each level here. It is quite possible that we are the technological civilization in our section of the galaxy. And there may be other folks out there who would be real happy to hear your message if you're sending it on beaten drums or, through various scents or however they communicate. And they just may not have the technology to look at the things that we're putting out or to even be able to consider the things. And think about this. If you have a civilization and you're on a planet that is, if not perpetually cloudy, cloudy so much that seeing the stars is just an occasional thing. The whole concept of astronomy may not have developed to the level that we consider. And even if it has, if you only get to see the stars occasionally, you may not be able to do the searches that we're doing. That being the case, they may not even have considered spaceflight because, what do we see?
Yeah, yeah.
So there are a lot of aspects involved in the question.
Within our own solar system, there are several planets or moons that are speculated to have an ocean under the crust, where they would not be able to see the sky. And if there had been life there, or is life there, they would not be able to see the sky and learn and decide on astronomy, and therefore, speculate about other worlds and things like that. So yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And in our solar system also, Titan, which has
a thick, hazy
it
atmosphere.
has the second thickest atmosphere in the solar system. Venus is first, Titan is second, Earth is third. I'm not counting the gas giants, of course. Titan is extremely cold, but has lakes and oceans of liquid methane and ethane. If the chemistry managed to evolve there into life, there could be life on Titan. But again, constantly hazy. They would never see the sky beyond the haze. They wouldn't develop any concept of the world outside of, or the universe outside of Titan, likely.
Okay. Let's see if I have one more question for you. Is there anything you want to mention that I haven't asked you about?
Oh, yeah, I kind of find interesting. When we were speculating on human missions to the stars, how would the human population expand beyond the solar system? Everyone is thinking about, it'd be really expensive to build these generation ships and launch them, et cetera, et cetera. It occurred to me, well, it occurred to a bunch of us, but I'll take credit.
Okay.
It occurred to a bunch of us that as we start building space habitats where people are living permanently, we're going to gradually solve the problem of holding a biosphere and an ecology in an artificial container. And this will last for a long time, hundreds of years, thousands of years. Gradually we'll fill up the solar system, the local neighborhood will get kind of packed, and people say, oh, I kind of want to move out. And we'll start seeing some of these facilities out to Mars, out to Jupiter, out to Saturn, where the farther out they go, the less dependent they are on energy from the sun. So eventually, and we're not talking next year, we're not talking next 1,000 years probably, but eventually we're going to see the solar system full of these things, and some of the ones farthest out towards the Kuiper Belt, we're going to have very little dependency on energy coming from the sun. I would suspect that some of them are going to say, you know, there's not really anything keeping us here. We don't have any real relations with those folks back on Earth. We don't have, you know, they're our forebears, but they're not really our cousins. Why don't we just slap some engines on this thing and let's go? You know, our folks have lived here for 1,000 years. Take 1,000 years to get to the next star? Oh, okay. The analogy that I like to use is the Polynesian diaspora. In Polynesia, when you would have folks living on an island, happy as anything, eventually you'd reach the carrying capacity of that island. A few families would build some boats, they'd put their chickens and their goats and whatever on, off they go across the ocean, find another uninhabited island. And they start growing their family there, getting real happy. A few generations later they've reached that carrying capacity, follows again. I suspect that's how it's likely to happen.
Okay.
No guarantees, but...
Okay. Thank you. It was an excellent interview.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
That was Doug Loss. This has been From Here to the Stars, a video series created by the Tennessee Valley Interstellar Workshop. The TVIW is a non-profit organization dedicated to thoroughly exploring the science and engineering that can eventually open up the reality of interstellar travel. I have been your host, Stephen Euin Cobb. If you enjoyed this video, please hit the like button, and you can subscribe to our channel for other such videos. On behalf of all of us here at the Tennessee Valley Interstellar Workshop, I thank you.